Hello, everybody! Welcome back. I thought I might as well get another couple of chapters done today, since it's the summer holidays, and the summer holidays are fast running out. We're reading The Devil's Engine, Hellraisers, first book in the Devil's Engine series. For those of you who have joined us so far, you all already know that. Marlowe's been expelled from school, ended up fighting demons, met a group of people who call themselves the Hellraisers, who are basically fighting demons. Decided not to join them, for obvious reasons. And they let him go, and he went back to his school, and he didn't realise they were using him as bait. So some of the enemy engineers are people, as you will find out, who can get superpowers from this weird thing called the Devil's Engine, followed him back to the school and tried to find out where the goodies were hiding. And then there was a massive fight at the school with lots of superpowers and crazy things. And then this guy called Mammon showed up, and he basically just makes the whole of the world rot. And they just managed to escape with their lives. So this chapter is called Fresh Kills. Marlowe didn't know how much later it was that the van shuddered to a halt. It might have been minutes. It felt like days. He lifted his head, the world gradually coming into focus. Pan lay beside him, her head resting on his chest, and she stirred too, blinking like she'd just woken. It only took a couple of seconds for her expression to harden, and she scowled as she pushed him away. She looked in shock, though, her whole body trembling, her chattering teeth the loudest sound in the sudden quiet. Marlowe struggled up, groaning. He felt like he'd just run an Ironman race, every single muscle aching. He eased his head left, then right, the tendons so tight they might snap. He couldn't make out much from down here, but he could see blue skies and he could hear seagulls, the soft lap of waves. Warm, musty air seeped in through the van's broken windows, and he inhaled deeply, doing a good impression of some bagpipes. He reached for his inhaler, pressing it until the tightness began to ease. How many shots were left? 10? 20 at a push. "Everyone okay?" Herc said softly, like he didn't want to give anyone a fright. He looked around, his pale face catching the light that streamed in through the windshield. "Yeah," said Pan. "I'm great. Just dandy." She pushed past the others, grabbing the handle and pulling hard. The van must have taken a beating on the drive because the door was wedged tight. "Truck," Pan said. "You think you might want to make yourself useful for a change?" The big guy didn't reply. He just stared at something only he could see. His eyes crusted with dried blood, making it look like he was wearing clown makeup. Pan kicked him, and not gently. "Hey, truck, I'm talking to you." He snapped out of his trance, and it seemed to take him a moment to work out where he was. He lumbered to his feet, ducking low to stop his head going through the roof. Grunting, he gave the door a shove, and it snapped off like it was made of plywood and clattered across the asphalt. Pan jumped out, standing in the sun, a breeze kicking up her short hair. "You're welcome, Truck," said Truck, speaking in a falsetto that was still deeper than most men's voices. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Truck. Man, you're so strong, Truck. You're my hero, Truck." The van rocked wildly on its suspension as he followed Pan. Night was next, taking Truck's outstretched hand as she skipped nimbly onto the pavement. Marlowe wanted to go too. The van stank of smoke and sweat, reminding him of what he'd seen outside the school. "Yeah," said his head. And what was that? It had seemed like the end of the world, something unimaginable. Literally, even now, knowing what he saw, he couldn't picture it. When he tried to look back, all he could make out was a black hole in his memory, like somebody had gone at it with a pair of shears. He clamped his teeth around the skin of one dirty knuckle, chewing, grateful to the pain for distracting him. "That was something," Charlie said beside him. When Marlowe turned to his friend now, he barely recognised the boy. Charlie's face was drawn and haggard, his eyes so bloodshot they didn't look human. "Please tell me I was high." Marlowe would have laughed if he could remember how. Herc leaned over the back of the seat, studying the girl from the school who was still out cold, and then them. His scarred brow creased into a frown. "Please tell me I'm still high," said Charlie. "You in one piece?" Herc asked Marlowe. Marlowe didn't know what to say. He just nodded. As an afterthought, he patted his legs, his chest, his crotch, just to make sure. Everything seemed to be where it was supposed to be. Herc coughed, wiping his mouth with his fist. "You know this guy?" "Who, Charlie?" Marlowe said. "Yeah, of course, he's a friend." "Shame," said Herc. "Huh?" Marlowe and Charlie asked together. "Nothing. Come on." Herc rubbed the back of his neck, grumbling. Then he popped open his door and stepped out. Marlowe could hear him talking about a helicopter as he strode across the lot. Marlowe stood, gritting his teeth against the pain. He hadn't gone far before Charlie's arm shot out, grabbing his wrist. In the half-light of the van, his eyes looked huge. Marlowe, was all he said. But there was a question there. Marlowe put a hand on top of his friend's, holding tight. "It's okay," he said. And then he snorted. "Actually, it's not okay. Not even close. I can't explain it. But these guys can." He helped Charlie up, and they crept across the van, jumping down into a small parking lot. His nose told him where he was, before his eyes, the instantly recognisable bittersweet aroma of the Fresh Kills landfill. The van was parked by the river, shielded by a platoon of bulldozers and a mountain of warehouses beyond. On the other side of the water were the rolling hills, trees and wildflowers of the island of Meadows, and just looking at them made Marlowe's chest feel a little looser, like he was standing in the countryside and not on the ass end of Staten Island. He took a deep breath through his nose, held it, then exhaled through his mouth. Something his mum had taught him to do when he felt an attack coming on, when he needed to calm down. It sounded a bit like he was playing a kazoo. Everyone was milling around, a collective unwinding. Pan stood right on the edge of the dock, hands on her hips, staring at the horizon, and even after what he'd seen, even though everything he thought he knew was falling apart, he couldn't help but admire the sight. "Yeah, now I know how you got embroiled in this mess," said Charlie. The smallest of smiles danced around his mouth, a butterfly looking to land. Marlowe felt his cheeks heat up, and he waved his friend's words away. Charlie breathed a laugh through his nose. "Always told you chasing tail would land you in trouble. Just didn't imagine it quite like this." "Tell me about it," said Marlowe. "I thought you said you weren't interested," said Herc. He was stooped over against the van, looking even older than he had when Marlowe had first met him. Out here, in the sun, each of his scars seemed to glow. There were so many of them that it looked like he'd been sewn together from scraps of other people's skin. "In door number 1. "Please tell me what he's talking about," said Charlie. "Why don't you?" Marlowe asked. "Tell us, I think we deserve it. We saved your asses back there." Herc nodded reluctantly. "Hey, Pam," he said. She didn't reply, and he shouted her name again 3 times until she turned and glared at him. "What?" "I think we need to talk." "Yeah," Pan said, marching towards them. Her face was so full of rage that Marlowe took a subtle step back, shielding himself behind Charlie. "About what? About the fact that he was there? About the fact that he nearly caught us? Jesus Christ, Herc, what the hell was Ostheim thinking? He landed us right in it just so we could use this scrawny arsehole as bait, just because there was a small chance we might catch a fish." "Wait, what?" said Marlowe. She ignored him, jabbing a finger at Herc. "He had no right to do that. You know what would have happened? Another 5 seconds and we'd be finished. We'd be worse than dead, Herc." She wiped her eyes with her hand, tears leaving trails in the dirt on her face. 5 more seconds. First Forrest, now this. He's getting dangerous, Herc. Ostheim's risking everything. He's going to send us all to hell. Herc sighed again, toeing the dirt with his boot. "Who was he?" Marlowe asked. "What? Or who? I don't know." "Oh," said Pan, shooting him a look that could have left an exit wound the size of a fist in the back of his skull. "You suddenly decided you want in? Last thing I remember is you clucking out the door like a chicken." "Yeah," Marlowe snapped back. "Last thing I remember is using a beat-up crossbow from World of Warcraft to shoot some bug-eyed freak in a big-ass evil bubble cloud." They eyeballed each other for a moment, the anger boiling up from Marlowe's gut. His hands hurt, and he realised that his fists were balled so tight that his nails were digging into his palms. He wasn't sure whether he wanted to punch the girl or kiss her. "No, you didn't," she said. "You were about to shoot yourself in the foot. Lucky I was there." "Definitely punch her." "Why do I feel like I'm missing the joke?" said Charlie. "What happened with you guys?" "No," Marlowe said, waving his hands in the air like a conductor. "Just start from the beginning. Tell me the stuff you forgot to mention the other day. I need to know." Herc and Pan shared a look. "You sure you're ready?" Herc asked. "You won't believe it." Marlowe laughed, but there was no humour there. After what he'd seen in the last 48 hours or so, it was possible to know what he believed. Herc took a step back and looked expectantly at Pan. She seemed about to argue. Then her shoulders sagged and she stared back out at the horizon. It took her an age to start speaking. "What would you say if I told you there was a machine that could grant any wish?" "I'd say, wait right here while I call the DEA," said Charlie, "because you're obviously smoking something pretty whack." Nobody laughed. Pan didn't even acknowledge the comment. A machine that can do anything, she went on, that can make you superhuman. Come on, said Charlie, that's truck, Pan yelled across the parking lot. The big guy was leaning against a bulldozer, sipping from a water bottle. Show them, like they haven't already seen it. Truck swallowed, replaced the cap on the bottle, then grabbed the bulldozer by its caterpillar tracks and lifted it. It tilted up at a 45-degree angle, the frame groaning in outrage. He held it for a few seconds, then let it go. It crashed back down, swaying back and forth like a rocking chair. Truck wasn't even breaking a sweat. He just went back to his drink. Got no sense of adventure, that guy, Pan said. Same deal every time. Hey, Knight, she called to the girl sitting on the dock. Got a sec? Knight nodded. Then in a sudden blur of motion, she was right next to them. Charlie actually squealed, staggering back in shock. Even though Marlowe had witnessed it in the school, he had to clamp his mouth shut to stop his jaw landing on his toes. Here, in broad daylight, away from the panic and the violence, it was just insane. What he was seeing was impossible. Nobody could move like that. The sheer force of acceleration would snap your neck like a twig. What? Knight said, panting slightly. Nothing, Pan replied. Knight frowned, mouthed whatever, then sped back to the riverside, a blur of colour that reminded Marlowe of a kingfisher he'd seen once on television. It can't be real, Marlowe, said Charlie. He didn't look shocked anymore, or even surprised. He just looked sad, like somebody who's discovered the universe has been playing a trick on them. It's real, said Pan, walking to the van, checking on the girl inside, then pulling a bottle of water from a duffel bag. She chucked it to Marlowe and he snatched it out of the air, screwing off the cap and taking a deep pull. Only now did he realise how thirsty he'd been, his mouth like sandpaper, so dry that it crackled as the water filled it. He downed 3/4 of the bottle before remembering Charlie, handing the rest to him. He took it, but he didn't drink, just let it hang by his side as Pan rejoined them. But how, Marlowe asked, feeling like his batteries had been recharged, the water making everything less fuzzy. The truth is, we're not sure, Pan said. All we know is that this machine, the engine, is something older than time, something that it doesn't belong in this world. It was discovered during the war beneath the streets of old Europe. Nobody knows who built it. To be honest, nobody knows how anyone could build it. So far, we've counted over 800 million moving parts, and there are sections of the machine we've not even gotten near yet. A machine, said Marlowe. I don't get it. Then maybe let me finish, Pan said. Marlowe held up his hands in surrender. The engine. It's hard to describe. You need to see it for yourself. There are so many moving parts, it's more like a creature than a machine. It's almost intelligent. She shuddered, and Marlowe could see the goosebumps erupt on her arms. She rubbed them away, still staring into space. It can give you anything. All you have to do is wish for it. Strength, like Truck, or the ability to run faster than sound, like Nightingale there. I've been invisible. I've had the ability to read minds, to control them. I've been able to fly. She smiled, obviously remembering something good. You've come back from the dead, said Marlowe, and her smile vanished like a mouse that's seen a hawk's shadow. She glared at him like it was his fault. Then she nodded. Yeah, it can do that too. It can do pretty much anything. But how? Asked Charlie. How is that possible? Because it's not something human, she replied. Alien, Charlie said. Pan shook her head. No, not that we can work out anyway. It's not alien. Then what? Said Marlowe. Something worse, she said. You ever heard of Faust? The name rang a bell, but Marlowe couldn't remember from where. Sounds like a player, said Charlie. Pan shook her head in disgust. It's a story, she said, about a guy who makes a deal with Satan. And what's that got to do with? Marlowe started. Then he frowned. It felt like something dark and cold had burst inside his stomach. Wait, what are you saying? Pan kicked the dirt, wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Her eyes caught the sun, and there might have been tears there. It's what the engine does, she said. It lets you make a deal with the devil. And the next chapter is She's Expiring. Oh yeah, I just remembered this one. This one's horrible. For a while, the only sound was the distant roar of traffic from the expressway and the lazy rush of Fresh Kills River. Then Marlowe's friend, the boy called Charlie, laughed. It was high-pitched and desperate, and there was a hint of lunacy in it. Pan knew the sound. She'd made pretty much the same one when she'd been first told about the engine. She'd also told Herc to go screw himself and various members of his family, then slapped him across the face for wasting her time. She looked at the old guy and smiled warmly. Seemed like an eternity ago that he'd walked into her cell and told her she had choices. It wasn't easy to hear, though. She knew that much. Marlowe and Charlie were staring at her with big, vacant expressions. She knew exactly what they were thinking. She would have felt sorry for them if her heart had been whole. "The devil," said Marlowe. "It's not..." Howard Herc explained it to her all those years ago. "It's not the devil, not the way you think. It's not something you'll ever find in the Bible. It's something older than that. Something nobody really understands. The devil's just a name for it. All we know is that you make a deal with the engine. You ask it for whatever you want and it grants you your wish. But not forever. You get 27 days and change." 27 days, said Charlie. It's a bit random. 666 hours, to be precise, she said. "Then what?" Marlowe asked. "You lose your powers?" If only it were that simple. "No, you don't lose them. You keep them till the end. Not that they'll do you much good. No, you make a contract with a machine, a contract signed in blood. You get whatever your heart desires for 666 hours. Then, when your contract expires, you pay up." "Pay up?" Marlowe and Charlie asked together. "With your life," she said. "And something else, too." "There's something worse than losing your life," snorted Marlowe. "Yeah," said Pam, turning and looking at the river, at the island beyond. It looked like a paradise now, flowers and trees and switchgrass, but she knew that underneath that lay half a century of trash and rubble and ruin. Just like my world, she thought. Everything looks okay, but scratch the surface and there are horrors there, things that you could never have imagined. And once again she thought of Maman heaving himself up the road, just too big, too powerful to fit in the universe. "What's worse than that?" Charlie asked. "It takes your soul," she said eventually, knowing how stupid it sounded, even though she'd almost lost hers so many times. Charlie laughed again, and even Marlowe was smiling. A solar flare of anger erupted inside her head, but she bit down hard. "Why is that so hard to believe? You've seen them, the demons. You've seen them with your own eyes." "The things in the parking lot," Marlowe said. "They were demons." "It's just our word for them," Pan said. "We don't know what they are. All we know is that you do not want to let your contract expire, because that's when they come. They can't exist in this world. They can only possess things." "Like the Exorcist?" Marlowe asked. "Kind of," she said. "But it's like the opposite too. They can't possess anything living. They can't just get inside you or another animal or a human. Not even a plant." "Yeah, I remember," Marlowe said. "They were coming out of the walls, out of cars. Not out of them. They were made from them." Pan closed her eyes and saw them there, clawing their way from the ground, from tables and chairs, from trucks, from anything and everything. They can only possess inanimate objects, things without a soul. But that's worse. That's a whole lot worse, because you cannot hide from them. There's no place on Earth you can be safe. "But you can kill them, right?" asked Marlowe. "I saw you." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Once your contract is up, you're finished. You still have your powers right up until you die. So you can fight them off for a while. But only for a while. No power can keep them at bay forever. Shotguns slow them down, but you have to blast the hell out of whatever they've possessed. Literally blast the hell. It takes a huge amount of energy for them to form in this world, this plane. They're strong, but only as strong as the material they possess. If you destroy the host, you destroy the parasite. But only for as long as it takes the demon to build up the energy to cross over again for another possession. You can hold them off for a while, but you're only delaying the inevitable. If your time is up, they will take you." "Take you where?" Marlowe asked. Pan shrugged. She'd asked Herc the same question. She'd asked Ostheim too. The truth was that nobody knew, but she had a good enough idea. She'd seen it too many times, the demons dragging you into the molten earth, into the fire. She'd felt it too, the other day when she thought her time had come, a huge, gaping, burning emptiness, the weight of eternity on her shoulders. "Take you somewhere you really don't want to be," she said. There was a moment of silence, broken only by a meaty fart from Truck's direction. It didn't do much to relieve the tension. "So how come you're still here?" Marlowe asked. "How come the demons didn't take you the other day? You survived." "I survived because my contract was broken," she said. Broken? This was always the hardest part to explain. Pam took a deep breath. "The engine is a machine. It broke as a contract. Years ago, centuries, when the machine was first built, the contracts were unbreakable. I mean, there are so many moving parts, so many variables, that nobody would have been able to crack the deal. But things have changed. Technology has improved. We've catalogued the machine. We've made digital maps of every section. Well, the sections we use. We have a much greater understanding of how it works, and a team of lawyers who work non-stop to break the contract before it expires. Lawyers? Charlie asked. Oh, anyone else hear an echo out here? She said. Yes, lawyers, but not like ambulance chasers or suits. These are more like, they're essentially quantum mathematicians. Cleverest guys on the planet, probably. We just call them lawyers because it annoys the hell out of them. And they what? Take the engine to court? Get a restraining order? Marlowe said. He turned away, and she locked her reply deep in her throat. Arguing wasn't going to help anyone right now. You've seen it, Pan said. You want the truth, just think. How else is any of this possible? And what about the thing that chased us up the road? Marlowe asked. Was that a demon too? Pan sighed. No, not quite. Maman is something else entirely. Something... Hey! It was Herc, yelling from the van. He clapped his big hands together. Enough with the socialising, our guest's waking up. Pan jogged over, peering into the darkness to see that Brianna was starting to stir. Her blonde hair was a mess, her clothes filthy and torn. She sat up, blinking away sleep, and Pan saw the moment of blissful unawareness before her memories clunked back into place. She scooted back on her ass, hitting the back of the van. Her brow furrowed, and Pan felt a stab of pain in the left-hand side of her brain. Herc must have felt something too, because he unholstered his pistol and aimed it at her head. Don't even think about it, he said, clicking back the hammer. I feel so much as a probe up there, and we'll be reading your mind when we wash it off the back of the van. Understand? The pain in Pan's head vanished as the girl nodded. Brianna, Pan said. She looked at Pan, a rabbit in the headlights. Truck appeared, blocking out the light. Night was there too. Pan reached in and grabbed another bottle of water from the duffel bag and offered it to the girl. You thirsty? Brianna shook her head like she'd been offered a bottle of poison. She's young, said Knight. Too young to be fighting for them. I'm 17, the girl replied, showing none of the confidence she'd had back at the school. Just. Well, happy goddamn birthday, Herc said. You must know what's going to happen now. You're going to ask me some questions, she said, some of that bluster returning. And I'm going to lie. Then we're going to stop asking so nicely, Pan said. Where's your engine? You should know, the girl said. It's up your butt. Where is Maman? Coming for you, she said, meeting Pan's eyes, not blinking. He knows all about you. All of you. He's going to end you. Yeah, said Pan. From what I saw back there, he couldn't even get his fat ass up the street. But something in her expression must have given away her fear, because Brianna smiled. He'll eat you alive, she said. I just wish I could be there to see it. Why won't you be? Asked Herc. Got a vacation planned? She just shrugged sadly and glanced at her watch. It must have been broken because she rattled it, then looked up and asked, Anyone got the time? Yeah, said Herc. Time you woke up, kiddo. Mamon's got his agenda, but you don't have to be a part of it. There are other ways of doing things. Like your way, she said, looking at Herc as if he were a piece of dog crap she was cleaning off her shoe. I'd rather die. Yeah, Pan said, resisting the urge to reach for a crossbow and grant the girl's wish. You guys make me sick. You've got all the power in the world and you live like this. You waste it. Chaos, bloodshed, rot and ruin. It's all the circle cared about. All you have to do is give us the location, said Herc. Last chance. She's never going to do it, said Pan. It won't even matter if she does. She could tell us exactly where it is, longitude and latitude, and we still won't find it. How many times do we have to do this dance? Tell us about Maman. How can we find him? And how do we kill him? You don't need to find him, she said. He'll find you. I told you he's going to find your engine, and when he does, this will all be over. Please, does somebody have the time? The fuse on Pan's patience burned up, and the fury detonated in her gut. She reached out and snatched Herc's gun from his sweaty hand before he even saw it coming, stepping into the van and pressing the weapon against the girl's temple. She hissed with pain, but the look she gave Pan showed no sign of weakness. Maman, Pan said. Now. Pan, Herc said, but she ignored him. Having one of the enemy right here at their mercy was a rarity. They had to make the most of it. Go on, said the girl. Do it. You're willing to die for him? Pan asked. I'd do anything for him, Brianna said. Anything to stop you, stop Ostheim getting what he wants. Now, please, would somebody tell me what the time is? It suddenly clicked. Why she was so desperate to know. Oh, crap, Pan said, lowering the gun and hopping out of the van. She's expiring. Now? Asked Herc, swearing. He started to back away. Not in the van, goddammit! Pan stood by the door, refusing to believe it. There was no way the Circulus Inferni would let her expire, not like this. Mind reading was an easy contract to break, one of the easiest. The Circle's lawyers would have no trouble. Mammon was an evil bastard, but surely even he wouldn't give up one of his own without a fight. Brianna looked up, her eyes full of a sad, tired resignation. You're fighting for the wrong side, she said. Mammon would welcome you. He welcomes everyone. Yeah, said Pan. I can see how much he cares. He's going to let you expire. Brianna shrugged. Happens to us all, eventually. Not like this, though, said Pan. She had to bite down on her lip to stop the lump in her throat from exploding out of her mouth. Not like this. There was a crack of static, as loud as a pistol shot, powerful enough to dent the van and rock it hard on its suspension. Brianna let loose a scream, clamping her hand to her mouth. Everyone scattered, but Pan held her ground, even as the ground beneath her trembled and cracked. It was like the earth was splitting in two. He can't do this, she said. It's not right. A bolt of brilliant blue light fizzed past her, a rip in reality that breathed out a blast of hot air. Pan gagged against the stench of sulphur, staggering away and wiping the tears from her eyes. There was another crunch, an invisible fist hammering a crater into the roof of the van. One of the tyres exploded, the headlights shattered. Pan looked into the growing darkness, Brianna just a lump of shadow with two diamond-bright eyes. She stared back, full of fear, full of defiance. Last chance, Pan said. You don't have to die for nothing. I'm not, she replied, her voice almost lost in a growl of thunder. I'm dying for him. He saved me. He'll save us all. He's sending you to hell, Pan said. And then she had to throw her hand in front of her face against an explosion of light. A shockwave hit her in the chest like a tackle, and she lost her footing, landing painfully on her back and rolling in the dirt. She felt hands under her armpits dragging her away, and by the time she'd opened her eyes again, it was all over. At first it looked like the van was inside a compactor, the metal crumpling like tinfoil, shrinking. Then something began to pull itself free of the wreck, a vaguely bestial shape with a head made up of the wheel arch and half a tyre, the body formed of the back bumper. It unfolded with an ear-shredding metallic squeal, the whole rear of the vehicle tearing away. The demon shook itself like a dog, gas spurting from the ruptured fuel line and pooling on the asphalt. Something else was rising from the ground like a corpse, dragging itself out of its grave. It looked like a turtle, a shell of asphalt over a body of orange dirt. A metal pipe ran the length of its midsection like it had been speared. It wriggled, its legs thrashing, until the pipe snapped free. Then it hauled itself out of the hole, opened a maw of concrete, and screamed. Jesus Christ! Pan heard Marlowe's voice by her side and glanced at him, seeing the terror etched into his face. He was chewing his knuckles like he hadn't eaten in a month. She ignored him, turning back to the van. They won't hurt you, Herc told the boy. Not unless you get in between them and her. They only want what they're owed. Her soul. The metal demon sniffed the air, then darted forward like a scorpion, pushing its snout into the gaping hole at the back of the van. Brianna groaned, jumping out of the door and making a run for it. Both demons howled like dogs catching scent of their prey. A noise like 1,000 fingernails being dragged down a blackboard. Pan slammed her hands to her ears and gritted her teeth against it. Every fibre of her being was telling her to go, to get the hell out of here before the demons discovered she was there. But Herc was right. They wouldn't come for her. Not this time. Can't we do something? Marlowe said. Can't we help her? Brianna skidded around the front of the van, almost tripping. The concrete demon reared up in front of her, 12, 13 feet tall, showering the parking lot with dirt. It swung a fist made of rock, and Brianna only just managed to duck beneath it. It struck the remains of the van and sent it rolling across the ground, spraying glass and shrapnel. The girl scrabbled on her hands and knees, but she only made it a dozen yards before the van demon caught up with her. Please, Marlowe said. There's nothing we can do, Pan replied, her voice made of ice. She signed a contract. The demon clamped a hand around Brianna's chest, hoisting her into the air. The girl tried to scream, batting her hands pathetically against the metal fist. The dirt demon loped over, uttering another hellish screech. Already the ground was growing soft beneath them, the skeletal remains of the van starting to sink into the melting asphalt, the spilled gas bursting into flame. I'm sorry, Pan said, knowing that Brianna still had the ability to hear her. It should never be like this. Brianna stopped struggling and looked right at Pan with those red-rimmed eyes. She breathed in a long, desperate breath. Then she spoke, and even from where Pan stood, even over the deafening clatter of the demons and the roar of the fire, Pan could hear her. "I'll see you in hell." The metal demon's jaws snapped shut around the girl like a bear trap, cutting her in two. The other demon attacked, its gaping maw engulfing her. All three of them were sinking into the earth, the air dancing around them, so hot that Brianna's blood ignited, hissing and steaming. Pan wanted to turn away, but she forced herself to watch as the demons fought over the girl, devouring her like wild dogs until all that remained were charred scraps of meat. Then, just like that, it was over. Brianna vanished beneath the scorched earth. The demons collapsed like marionettes whose strings had been cut, the metal one crashing to the ground, the other one dissolving in a hail of dirt. The parking lot fell quiet, the ground becoming solid once again. But Pan swore she could still hear Brianna, a distant, unending scream as the very essence of her was dragged into the depths. Only when that too had faded did Pan finally close her eyes and start to cry. Gruesome. Okay, about time for another couple. Okay, this chapter is called Goodbyes. Marlowe couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He had the absurd idea that he was in an open-air theatre watching some kind of sick show. If he spoke, then the illusion would be over, and the alternative was just too awful to think about. Even though he'd seen it twice now, the demons appearing out of nowhere, each time to murder a girl, he couldn't believe it. He noticed that he was holding somebody's hand, his fingers locked tight in a sweaty grip. He looked to see Charlie there, pale and drawn, his eyes as wide as moons. His teeth were chattering. Marlowe felt awkward, but he didn't let go. He thought that if he did, then it would be like weighing anchor. He might just float away. The laws of physics had been well and truly obliterated, after all. He wasn't sure how long they stood there, the six of them. Nobody spoke. Nobody really made any noise at all, apart from Pan's soft, desperate sobs. They all just stared at the parking lot. The two mounds of metal and dirt lay still, just bits and pieces of a broken world, and it was almost impossible to believe that they had ever possessed life. The splashes of crimson, the brightest thing in sight, spattered across the ravaged concrete, were the only evidence of what had happened, that and the ribbons of torn cloth that drifted across the lot, kicked along by the wind. They looked like they were trying to escape. It was Herc who broke the tableau. He coughed gently, a noise that seemed to make everybody flinch. Then he walked to Pan's side and wrapped her in his big arms, pulling her head onto his chest. "Nothing you could have done," he said. "It's not your fault." She pulled loose and gave him an angry shove, wiping away tears with the back of her arm. "It's his fault," she said, spitting. "Maman just let her die." "And you're surprised?" rumbled Truck. "You know he'd kill off every single one of his engineers, every one of his lawyers, if it kept him safe." He smacked a giant fist into a palm and sent a clap of thunder out across the parking lot. It echoed back off the warehouses. "Coward!" "You think Ostine would have done any different?" asked Knight, kicking at a loose stone. "You think he'd risk it?" "No way Ostine would let us die like that," Pan said. But even Marlowe noticed the hesitation there, the uncertainty. "You're forgetting that this is a war," said Herc. "We're soldiers, nothing more. Soldiers die." "Oh, gee, thanks for the pep talk," muttered Truck, turning away and walking to the river. Knight followed him, treading in his shadow. "Marlowe," said Charlie, a voice that was broken into 1,000 pieces. "Yeah? This is a dream, right? I mean, this can't actually be happening." "Kid, believe me," said Herc. "This is about as real as it gets." Herc turned to them, running a hand through his greying buzz cut. "So it looks like we're right back here again," he said. "Choices." "Choices," said Marlowe. "Yeah, okay. You mean choose that? Choose the same thing that happened to her?" "No, thanks." "Did Pan tell you why we do it? Why we do what we do?" he asked after a moment. "No," said Marlowe. "Just about the engine, we do what we do because if we didn't, the whole world would look like that." He jabbed his thumb over his shoulder. Marlowe looked at the van, at the pools of blood that were evaporating in the heat. A pocket of dust crumbled free from the dead demon, and he jumped like he'd had an electric shock, a wave of nausea rushing over him and leaving him coated in cold sweat. "What do you mean?" asked Charlie. Herc sighed. I don't have time for the whole story. We've got to move. Chopper should be inbound. He chewed his lip, his brow furrowed in concentration. Our engine. It's not the only one in existence. There are two that we know of for sure. They have one. Mammon and the Circulus Inferni. Yeah, said Marlowe, I got that much. The engines, they were designed by the same person, the same force, whatever you want to call it. They both have the same powers, the ability to grant you any wish. They both ask for the same price in return, but we use them for very, very different purposes. Marlowe could make out a very soft rumble in the distance, the throb of a helicopter. Herc heard it too, and when he spoke again it was faster, full of impatience. Cut a long story short, Mammon recruits his engineers to cause havoc, to destroy lives, to kill innocents. His goal... He shook his head, his expression full of disgust. He wants an end to everything. He wants the demons to spill out of the pit and consume the entire world. He wants hell on earth, literally. And the engine can do that, asked Marlowe. How? The chopper was getting closer, a pulse of noise that seemed to fill the whole sky. Herc glanced at his watch, then over at Truck. Prepare for exfil. Pop a smoke. He turned back to Marlowe. Yeah, the engines can do that. Fortunately for us, he hasn't worked out how yet. It's our job to make sure that never happens. So you're basically trying to save the world? Marlowe asked, feeling his eyebrows creep up in disbelief. Herc shrugged. Yep, that's us. Goddamned heroes. Herc walked to what was left of the van, rummaging around inside the wreck. Truck had set off a canister of red smoke, which curled lazily into the summer sky. Marlowe stared at it, mesmerised for a moment, then turned his attention to Pam. Is it true, he asked, you do what you do to save the world? Pam just scoffed. This world is already screwed, with or without the engine. But yeah, it's our job to stop Mammon opening the gates of hell and filling the streets with freaks. A shudder ripped through Marlowe's body at the thought of it. Hundreds of demons, maybe thousands, tens of thousands, tearing their way into the world. We wouldn't stand a chance. Herc must have found what he was looking for, because he walked back over, a small black pouch in his hands. You in or out? He asked. You mean come fight with you? Said Charlie. Like her, like these guys. Herc nodded. Charlie turned to Marlowe, shrugging. It's got to be better than school, right? He said. No, Marlowe replied. No way, Charlie. You got your life on track. You're doing good. You can't give it up. It was the truth. Charlie had turned his life around in Victor G. Good grades, the promise of a scholarship. He'd put the bad times behind him, had something positive to look forward to if he didn't screw it up. Oh, man, you think I can go back after this? He said. After what we've seen? You really want to die like her? Marlowe said. Torn to pieces, dragged to wherever she went. Come on, man. It's my fault we're here. I shouldn't have brought you with me. You can't ruin the rest of your life because of me. So what? He said, squaring up. You think you deserve this and I don't? Deserve it, Marlowe said, not backing down. Charlie, I got nothing. Kicked out of school, got the police after me. What do I have left? Go live with my mum for the rest of my days, working at the plant, slinging cement? You don't understand, man. This is my one shot at doing something good. Don't you dare, said Charlie, pointing a finger at Marlowe. Every time, dude, every single time, you just dump me, run off without me. Not again. We do this, we do it together. Herc was fiddling with the bag, unzipping it and peering inside. He pulled out something long and thin that glinted in the sun. Marlowe recognised it straight away, the sight making him feel sick to his stomach. A hypodermic, probably filled with concentrated alcohol. Charlie was too focused on Marlowe to notice. Not again, man, he said. Not this time. Gotta have an answer, Herc said. The chopper sound was palpable now, a second heartbeat inside Marlowe's skin. He looked up to see a black speck against the blue. Yes or no? Yes, Charlie said, at the same time that Marlowe said, no, not him, just me. Marlowe, said Charlie, please, you're my best friend, my only friend. I need you. I need this. Marlowe's stomach was doing somersaults, something fat crawling up and sitting in his throat. The thought of saying goodbye just about snapped his heart in two, but he knew there was no other way. He pictured Charlie being chewed into bloody pieces. No way. He couldn't do it. Please do, Charlie said. Let's do this together. No, said Marlowe. He looked at Herc and nodded. Just me, he repeated. Herc stepped up behind Charlie and jabbed the needle into his neck. Charlie yelped, grabbing the wound and staggering back, his expression twisted, his eyes full of disbelief. What have you done? He said to Marlowe. It's okay, man. It's just alcohol. Just relax. It'll be okay. He walked to Charlie, but the other boy staggered away, looking at Marlowe like he'd stabbed him in the back. You bastard, he said, his words starting to slur. How could you? You were my friend. Marlowe, you were my friend. You think they're going to want you when they find out the truth? Find out you're a coward? Charlie stumbled, dropping onto his ass, his eyes losing focus. Marlowe ran to him, cradling him in his arms, wondering if it was too late to change his mind. And the chopper was almost at them, flying low over the river and blasting out a mind-numbing pulse. It hovered over the parking lot, kicking up a tsunami of dust as it spun around and slowly touched down. Pan looked at it, then at Marlowe. Are you really going to take him? Marlowe heard her say. Why not? Herc replied. He'll be a nightmare. You won't be able to control him. Funny, Pan, said Herc, replacing the needle in the pouch. That's what everyone said about you. He's a hothead. He'll get somebody killed. Yep, they said that about you too. He won't do what he's told, I can tell. He'll do the opposite of what he's told. Herc turned to look at her. Pan, can you hear the words that are coming out of your mouth? He's nothing like me, she said, glaring at Marlowe. No, nothing like you, Herc said, turning to the chopper. The door slid open, revealing the moose-faced guy, Bullwinkle. Absolutely, completely, 100% nothing at all like you. Come on. Pan grumbled something else and jogged to the helicopter, and Truck and Knight following her. Time to go, said Herc. Best say goodbye. You won't see him again. Charlie kicked at the ground, trying and failing to stand up. He blinked, gulping for air like he was drowning. His eyes swam in and out of the fugue, latching onto Marlowe for a second before drifting away. You're a coward, he said again, slurred almost beyond recognition. I trusted you. I'm sorry, Marlowe said. Please, Charlie, I did it for you. Charlie said something else, but he was too far gone. Marlowe lowered his friend's head gently to the ground, then stood, wishing he could give Herc a different answer. But there was no time. Herc grabbed him by the shoulder, marched him towards the chopper. Strong hands hauled him inside, Herc following and sliding the door shut behind him. Plane tanked and ready to go, Herc yelled to the pilot. The woman nodded, then Herc wiggled a finger in the air and the chopper lifted off, bucking unsteadily. Marlowe looked through the filthy port window, seeing Charlie sprawled in the dirt, alone. Then they banked hard and he was gone. No going back now, said Pam, sitting beside him on one bench. Congratulations on making the stupidest decision of your life. Pan, said Herc as he crashed down on Marlowe's other side. For once, could you please not be such an evil cow? He held out a hand, and Marlowe shook it limply. Herc squeezed, pumping his arm with enthusiasm. Kid, you did the right thing, he said, grinning. Welcome to the Hellraisers. So, he joined eventually. That's in part 2, Old Magic. I might as well crack on and get the first one done. This chapter is called Don't Bath in My Jet. The plane shuddered, and Marlowe stifled his scream with the back of his hand. It was as if there was a demon about to crawl its way out of the fuselage, tear the jet in two, and send them all hurtling to the ground 30,000 feet below. It lurched again, and this time he let out a screeching cry that was somehow louder than the roar of the engines. He clutched the sink hard enough to make his knuckles crack, offering a prayer to anything or anyone that was listening. Please don't let us crash, please don't let us crash, please. There was a knock on the door of the tiny restroom, a voice from outside. Hey kid, you okay in there? Herc asked. You've been a while. That was an understatement. He'd been locked in here for going on 7 hours, pretty much since they'd left the chopper at Linden Airport and bundled into a private jet that was waiting for them on the runway. It had been the first time in his life that he'd been to an airport, let alone on an actual plane, and he'd been giddy with excitement right up until the point they'd accelerated for takeoff, and his insides had just about been pulled out of his rear end. That hadn't been the worst of it either. The fact that the whole team had been laughing at him was almost enough to make him open the door and dive into oblivion. Don't make me come in there, Herc said. Seriously, don't. I can smell it from out here. I'm fine, Marlowe said, sniffing the air. True, he'd pretty much unloaded from both ends from sheer terror, but that had been hours ago. It was something I ate. The plane vibrated again, like they were inside a washing machine at full spin. Is it supposed to be doing that? Marlowe asked. What that? What that? Sorry, Herc said. No, one of the engines has blown up. We're preparing to crash land. That's why I wanted to speak with you. What? Calm down, kid, Herc said, laughing. Don't crap your shorts. Again, it's just a bit of turbulence. The plane dipped, and he felt his stomach hover somewhere in his throat. He squeezed off a shot of his inhaler to try to remove it. We're not far off, Herc said. Got another 30 minutes flying time. Just wanted to let you know. You can come out when we've stopped laughing. Well, now, really. Marlowe held his clammy head in his hands, wanting to throw up again, but knowing there was nothing left to eject. He heard Herc's footsteps retreating and exhaled slowly, trying to control the panic. His heart was a woodpecker trying to hammer out through his ribs. He'd seen a lot of crazy in the last few days, but surely nothing was more insane than the idea of being inside a small tube as it burned its way through the sky. He glanced at the walls, just a thin sheet of metal between him and nothing much at all, and he felt his bowels loosen again. But if they were preparing to land soon, then he needed to get back to the others. There was no way he was going to go down in history as a guy who died in the restroom. He splashed his face with cold water and stared at his reflection. He didn't like what he saw. Not because of the sticky sheen of his skin, the red-veined eyes, like he was 100 years old. No, he hated it because of what he'd done to Charlie. He never should have left him there, not like that. He wondered if his friend was still there, out cold on the parking lot. What if he'd tried to get away and he toppled into the river? His best friend, his only friend, might be getting eaten by fish right now, his bloated and unrecognisable corpse found weeks later floating somewhere in the Raritan Bay. Of all the cowardly things he'd done in his life, this had to be the worst. Marlowe gagged, reaching for his cell so that he could call him, sighing when he remembered it was gone. "I'm so sorry, Charlie," he said. "Just be okay, yeah?" He took another couple of deep breaths, then unlocked the door, squeezing through. A curtain separated him from the main cabin, and he pulled it open to see everyone looking at him. They all managed to hold a straight face for a second or two, then Truck cracked, spluttering out a deep, booming laugh. And the others followed him into meltdown. They howled together. Night actually crying with laughter, slapping her own legs in an attempt to stop herself. Even Pan had a smile on her face, although she was doing her best to conceal it. Betty, the woman who patched him up back in the tower, wore a wry smile. Only Bullwinkle and Hope, the guys he'd fought back in the elevator, sat quiet, still wearing the bruises he'd given them. Marlowe's cheeks ignited, and he had to force himself to stand there, teeth clenched, rather than run wailing back into the restroom. "It's," Herc said, wiping a tear from his eye, "it's not you, I promise." "No, man," said Truck. "No way we'd ever laugh at you. You're one of us now, a member of the team, got a key to the company bathroom and everything." They erupted again, and Marlowe sighed, traipsing to a spare chair and collapsing into it. He'd just about gotten his seatbelt on when the plane bucked, shuddering violently for what felt like forever. It was as if nobody else even noticed it, and he chewed his knuckles to try to conceal his terror. "How about Captain Vomit?" said Knight. "Huh?" Marlowe asked. "Now, I reckon crapper," said Herc. "It's got a nice ring to it, no pun intended." "What are you guys talking about?" Marlowe said, although nobody could hear him over the new round of giggles. He blew out another sigh and looked away, trying to pretend he wasn't bothered. This felt like the first day of school all over again. Everybody mocking him about his asthma, pretending to wheeze and choke. Next they'd be taking turns to give him a wedgie. Now, just like them, he wished Danny was here to kick their asses. The only other thing to look at was the window, giving him a view of the moon-streaked clouds below, the vast blanket of stars overhead. His stomach did a backflip, and he had to stare at the floor for a moment to avoid the rush and roar of vertigo. "I've got it," said Truck, clicking his giant fingers. "Ah, man, I've got it. Elvis." "Elvis?" said Herc, looking about as confused as Marlowe felt. "Why Elvis?" "Because he was in there so long I thought he died on the toilet." Nobody laughed. "You know," Truck said, "because Elvis died on the toilet." "Too far," said Herc, stony-faced. "You don't make jokes about the king." "Would somebody please tell me what the hell you're going on about?" Marlowe said, wondering how much more his credibility would be dented if he just gave in and started crying. "Su nombre," said Knight. "Your nickname. We're trying to decide what it should be." "What's wrong with Marlowe?" he said, feeling the plane dip a little more, making his head spin. How could there be all that space beneath him and nothing holding them up? "To be honest, Marlowe fits just fine," said Herc. "You know, the writer." "The what?" said Truck. "Writer," said Herc, obviously disgusted. "The author, you know, Christopher Marlowe with an E. He wrote a story about somebody selling his soul to the devil." Truck shrugged. "What, like Harry Potter or something?" "Oh, for the love of... You guys embarrass me." There was a soft chime, and the seatbelt lights pinged on. Marlowe grabbed his belt to make sure it was buckled up, pulling it so tight it could have acted as a gastric band. The plane descended, making Marlowe's ears ache, and he swallowed to pop them. They sank into the clouds like they were a submarine plunging into an ocean of cotton wool. The plane shook until they dropped out of the bottom, and for a moment Marlowe thought they must have been flipped upside down because the world below was a canvas of black felt studded with stars. Then he realised they were lights, houses, streets, cars, and even though the terror still gripped him, he couldn't stop himself putting his nose to the glass in fascination. "That's quite something, right?" said Herc. "Where are we?" he asked as the ground rose up to meet them. "Prague," said Knight. "Prague?" Marlowe had never heard of it. "It's in the Czech Republic." "Oh, okay." He wished he'd spent more time paying attention in geography. "Prague, that's where the engine is, right?" There was silence behind him and he turned. Kind of," said Truck. "Not where it is, but it's how we get to it. It's complicated." Marlowe returned his attention to the window, the ground close enough now that he could make out trees and individual cars. But they're supposed to be going this fast. He gripped the armrests of his chair, swallowing hard to stop whatever was left in his stomach from finding a way up his throat. "Don't worry, kid," said Herc. "Landing's not the most dangerous bit." He snorted a laugh. "Just the second most dangerous. We'll probably be fine. You'll be on the ground in no time. Then we'll head to the engine." "Cool," he said, his words steaming up the glass. He closed his eyes, waiting for the crash, for the explosion, for the fire. I just might need to use the restroom first." He was almost grateful that the sound of the plane screeching down was drowned out by another chorus of laughter. And we'll do one more. Yeah, we'll do one more. That'll take them up to where the engine is. Okay, another world. It was less like he'd flown to another continent, and more like he'd arrived in a whole new world. Everything felt different the moment he stepped out of the plane door. The sky was bigger, the stars were so numerous and so bright it was as if the sun had exploded into a billion burning pieces. He took a breath, and even that felt strange. The air so crisp, so clean, so cool, that it was like he'd just had a blast on his inhaler. This must be what it's like not to have asthma, he thought, and he felt a sudden deeper rush of hatred for it, knowing that the monster still sat on his back, its fingers hovering next to his throat. The plane powered down, the engines whining, and then it hit him. How quiet it was here. Where were the revving cars, the horns, the shouts, the sirens? "Gonna stand there all night?" said Pan, barging past him and clattering down the stairs. He followed her. "No, it's just I'm not used to being away from home." "First time abroad?" she said, over her shoulder. "First time abroad, first time out of state. Apart from Jersey, obviously." "Jersey doesn't count," she said, walking across the floodlit tarmac. This couldn't have been the city's main airport because there was only one hangar, a silhouette against the sky, and a cluster of smaller buildings. Not unless things were just smaller in Europe. There were 3 cars at the side of the runway, 2 black Land Rover Defenders and a bright blue BMW M6 Hurricane, all with their engines running. Figures stood beside them, shielded by the blazing headlights, just ghosts in the dark. It was so surreal. He rubbed his gut to try to settle it. "Nothing to worry about," said Truck, rolling up beside him and planting a huge hand on his shoulder. It weighed a ton, and Marlowe grunted in surprise. "I remember the first time I got here. I freaked. I wouldn't even get on the plane. They had to dope me, Mr. T style." "How long ago was that?" Marlowe asked, grateful to know he wasn't the only one. "A couple of years ago now," he said. "Herc pulled me out of an illegal boxing ring in Chicago, told me I'd be better off fighting for something that might make a difference. And here I am." Truck lifted his hand, and Marlowe felt about 20 pounds lighter, stretching the kinks out of his back. "This is so weird," he said. "I feel like I'm dreaming." "Believe me," Truck replied, laughing so deeply that it was almost subsonic. "Weird doesn't cut it yet. Doesn't come close. You haven't seen anything yet." Truck sashayed across the runway, replaced by Herc. The older man was carrying half a dozen huge bags, and he looked pissed. "Any one of you lazy bastards wants to help?" he yelled after the others. Nobody replied. Herc swung 2 of the bags off his shoulder and handed them to Marlowe. "Here, make yourself useful." They walked towards the SUVs, and gradually the figures there came into focus. A couple of guys a little older than him, mid-20s he guessed. One of them was so tall and thin and perfectly manicured that he looked like a store mannequin. He was dressed in a sharp suit and was wearing sunglasses, even though it was the middle of the night. "Herc," he said, in a voice he could have stolen from Sherlock Holmes, "you're late." "I got held up," he replied gruffly. "Tends to happen when Maman chases you down the street." "Yes, Ostheim told me. He wants to talk." "He's had all night to talk to me," Herc said, slinging the bag to the other guy, who stuffed them into the back of one of the Land Rovers. "It's late, and I'm tired." The man wearing shades turned to Marlowe, an unpleasant sneer creasing his face. Another stray dog for your pack? He asked. And Marlowe felt his hackles rising. He took a step forward, trying to make himself look as big as possible. The man just shook his head. Oh, so bloody predictable. Aggressive, impatient, troubled, undisciplined. This one smells, too. A mongrel even by your standards. Hey, said Marlowe. But Herc rested a hand on his arm, shaking his head. Sunglasses Guy turned and climbed into the driver's seat of the blue BMW, slamming the door shut and revving the engine. Herc steered Marlowe towards the defender, speaking in a whisper. Ignore douchebag there. His name's Hanson, and he's British. That explains it, said Marlowe. He climbed onto the back seat, asking, Where are we going? Straight to the engine, kiddo. Just sit back and enjoy the sights. This particular sack has some of my favourite shades of black. What? Asked Marlowe. Herc lifted a piece of cloth that looked like it might once have served as a diaper in medieval times. Rules is rules, Herc said. You need to put this on. No way, Marlowe said. It's got stains on it. Yeah, all adds to the flavour. He opened it up and offered it again. It's either this or I knock you out. Marlowe still wasn't sure which was worse, but he took the hood and gingerly lowered it over his head. It smells of ass, he said, his voice muffled. Yeah, sorry about that, said Herc. I think Truck was sitting on it on the plane. Great. Marlowe heard the door shut. Then the engine gunned and they were moving, fast. Herc clapped him on the back, making him jump. Just close your eyes and enjoy the ride. It wasn't exactly enjoyable, but a trip on the back of a drunk three-legged donkey would have been smooth compared to the experience he'd just had on the jet. The Land Rover took to the streets like a racing car, accelerating and braking with equal force, screeching wildly around the corners. Marlowe would have been worried, but not being able to see anything took some of the fear out of the experience. He just settled back in his chair, closed his eyes, and listened to Herc droning on. I'd like to take this opportunity to fill in a few of the details, he said. I'm sure you have quite a few questions. I'm going to do my best to preempt them. First, who we are. We're an organisation called the Hellraisers. I don't know where it comes from. We've always been called that. I guess because we raise hell wherever we go. But it's kind of ironic too, really, given what our purpose here is. Right, Marlowe thought. It sounded more like a mad 80s rock group, Lloyd Cole and the Hellraisers, coming to a venue near you. 2. How long have we been around? Well, it's complicated. The engines are old. Very old. Nobody knows for sure, but it might be centuries. Millennia, maybe. Our organisation, the Hellraisers, has existed for almost as long, but in its current form only since the last century, since the war. There's a lot of history there, kid, that I don't want to bore you with, but for a while the engines were lost, only rediscovered in the 30s when... Marlowe tuned out, lulled into a stupor by the warmth and motion of the car. He'd not slept on the plane. It was hard to sleep when you were too busy screaming and puking in a tiny room, and the exhaustion was like another hood pulled down over his consciousness. He dozed, waking when he sensed that the vehicle had stopped. The world was a pit of silence, only the sound of his breathing echoing back from the sack. He reached up and pulled it off, seeing that the car was empty. There was nothing but darkness out of the windows, like they'd driven right off the edge of the planet. Hello? He said. Herc? Pan? He fumbled with his seatbelt, but his fingers didn't work properly, everything moving like he was underwater. Hey, guys? They're lying to you, said a voice from the front of the car, a whisper. Marlowe jumped, his heart almost stalling. Somebody had materialised in the passenger seat, staring out of the windshield at the darkness beyond, a face shrouded in shadow. Even his reflection in the rear-view mirror was inscrutable. 2 eyes as black as pitch, unblinking, a crawling sense of unease skittered down Marlowe's spine. Where are they? Who the hell are you? They're lying to you, said the man again, and his whole body seemed to shake for a second, too fast, the way an image flickers when you pause a VHS. Who? Marlowe said, trying to push the button on his belt. He reached for the door handle and pulled, but it came off in his hand like a strand of warm licorice, sticking to his fingers. He yelped, trying to shake it off. The whole car was losing its shape, like it was melting in some immense heat. What's going on? Let me out. It's too late for that, Marlowe, said the man. There is no way out. It knows who you are. It? Marlowe was panicking now, feeling his windpipe begin to fill. He coughed, snatching in a half-breath that stank of death and decay. I don't understand. The man raised a finger, pointing to the darkness outside the window. Marlowe looked, but there was nothing there, just an impossible void. Could he hear something, though? A distant rolling wave of thunder. He wheezed in another breath, but there was no oxygen in it, like he was drowning. He pulled his inhaler out of his pocket and put it in his mouth, only to feel it squirm between his lips. He screamed, spitting it out, seeing a fat orange slug writhe in the footwell. Bile burned up from his stomach, choking him. "No," he said, punching the window, feeling the glass melt around his fist. He was sinking into his chair, the whole car trying to fold over him, smothering him. And still that sound of thunder grew. No, not thunder, but the pounding of hooves, like something was galloping this way. Fast. Marlowe struggled, but the more he moved, the more the melting car sucked him in, burying him alive. "Please stop it!" The man in front began to wail, the desperate sob of a dying man. The noise got louder, rising in pitch, becoming a scream, a rattling shriek. Marlowe screamed too, the fear filling him from head to toe like ice water. Something was appearing out of the darkness, an impossibly huge shape that bore down on them with gut-wrenching speed. The scream from the front was still growing, so loud now that Marlowe felt a gout of blood erupt from his ear, so loud that the car was shaking. The man's head began to turn, rotating as smoothly as an owl's, twisting too far, like his neck was about to snap. His eyes were as big as saucers, dripping black, his mouth a gaping wound, blasting out that ear-shattering howl of despair. "No!" Marlowe shouted. "No, no, 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 no!" The shape outside rose up in his window, travelling too fast, darkness flooding from darkness, a freight train about to crush them. Marlowe held up his hands against it, screaming. It hit him like a slap, wrenching him up out of the car, out of the dark. He punched the air, kicking, trying to fight it, but the shape was holding him down, stopping him from moving. Gradually, the world swam into focus, 3 faces staring down at him, etched with concern. Marlowe struggled for a second until he recognised Herc, Pan, Truck. He lay there, sobbing with the relief of it. "Whoa," said Truck. "That must have been some nightmare, bro." "Nightmare," said Marlowe, snatching in an airless breath. Herc handed him his inhaler, and he shook it, feeling how close to empty it was. He took a couple of hits and lay there, his body trembling. Already the dream was leaking out of his head, dissipating like salt in water. He was more than happy to let it go. "Happens to us all," said Herc, offering him a hand. Marlowe took it and hauled himself up, holding on to it for a fraction longer than he needed to. They were in a narrow, cobbled street next to the SUV, quaint old-fashioned buildings on both sides. A large gate stood open right in front of them, big enough to get a car through. He caught a glimpse of a courtyard beyond, swimming with yellow light. He stood there for a moment, everything aching. His knuckles were sore, like he'd punched a wall. "Got a pretty good right hook for a scrawny kid," said Truck, grinning. He had a split lip, and he sucked the blood from it with a noisy slurp. Marlowe blushed. "Oh, hey man, I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." "Don't sweat it," Truck said. "If I had to travel all this way with an ass rag over my face, I'd want to punch something too." He walked through the gate, laughing, and Marlowe stood there. "The nightmares, they're normal," Pan said, appearing by his side. He looked at her, at the way her face caught the light, hard and yet perfectly soft at the same time. Even though his heart had taken a beating, he still felt it wobble. She turned to him, and the look she gave him wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't quite a smile either. "It's because we're here," she said. "Here?" Marlowe said. "Yeah, here. We're at the engine." We'll leave it there for now. Come back very soon, and we will find out all about the engine. And we are more than halfway through now. That was pretty good, wasn't it? Oh, awesome. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. This next bit's nice. It's kind of like a little bit of a break from the action, but we get to see a little bit more about what the engine's all about. We get to see how it works. And we get to know a little bit more about the hellraisers before, predictably, all hell gets raised once again. So I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'll come back very soon for the next instalment of The Devil's Engine.